Single dad finds an abandoned train in the forest, and the passenger car makes him tremble. Daniel Parker never imagined that searching for firewood to sell at the local market could change his life forever. The 42-year-old man was raising alone 5 children. He had found years ago in a state of abandonment, and now he faced financial difficulties after losing his job at the neighboring farm. It was when he spotted among the trees of the dense forest a rusty train car covered in moss and vines that his heart raced. Daniel approached the abandoned train cautiously, noticing that dozens of monkeys had made the place their home. But it was upon entering the passenger car that his legs trembled in a way he had never experienced. Daniel had left the 5 children playing near the creek while he explored the area in search of dry wood. Ethan, 6 years old, was the youngest of the group he considered his family. Emily, 8 years old, always looked after the younger ones with maternal dedication. The twins Nathan and Mason, 9 years old, were inseparable and full of energy, and there was also Olivia, the oldest at 12, who showed impressive maturity for her age. The interior of the car was damp and dark, with rotten wooden benches and broken windows through which invasive vegetation crept in. Daniel used his cell phone as a flashlight, illuminating the abandoned space in search of something useful. It was then that he saw on the opposite wall something that made him stagger back, as if he had been punched in the stomach. Dozens of photographs were stuck to the walls of the car, some already faded by moisture, others still preserved in small makeshift frames. Daniel approached slowly, unable to believe what his eyes were seeing. In one of the photos, he immediately recognized Olivia's face, but she seemed to be only 3 or 4 years old and was in the lap of an elegant woman he had never seen. Another photograph showed the twins, Nathan and Mason, when they were very small, playing in a backyard that was definitely not his. Emily appeared in a third image, smiling next to a middle-aged man who was holding her little hand, and Ethan, his little Ethan, was portrayed as a baby in the arms of an elderly lady with grey hair. Daniel felt the world spinning around him. His hands were shaking so much he almost dropped his phone. All these years, he had assumed the 5 children were complete orphans, with no family at all. That's what he had been told when the old local shelter closed its doors, and he volunteered to care for them informally. But those photographs told a completely different story. Each of the children he loved as his own had familiar, smiling faces looking at them in moments of affection and happiness. There were families behind those images, people who had once been important in each of their lives. The sound of children's laughter reached the car, bringing Daniel back to reality. The children were approaching, curious about his delay. Quickly he put some of the photographs in his shirt pocket and left the car, trying to disguise the turmoil of emotions he felt. "Dad, Daniel, what was in there?" asked Olivia, always the most observant of the group. "Nothing important, my dear, just an old, dirty car," he replied, forcing a smile. "Can I see?" insisted Nathan, already trying to head toward the car entrance. "No!" Daniel spoke louder than he intended, startling the children. "I mean, it's dangerous in there. Rotten wood, animals. I don't want you to get hurt." Emily held Ethan's hand, who had hidden behind her at Daniel's sharper tone. The man realized he had overreacted and knelt down to be at the children's level. "I'm sorry, kids. Daddy didn't mean to yell at you. It's just really dangerous, and I worry. How about we head back home? I'll make that corn porridge you all love so much." Their faces lit up at the promise, and soon they were all walking back along the trail that led to their modest wooden house. Daniel carried Ethan in his arms, but his mind remained in the abandoned train car, processing the disturbing discovery. That night, after the children had fallen asleep on their mattresses spread across the floor of the house's only bedroom, Daniel examined the photographs by candlelight. Each image was a window into a past he knew nothing about. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The photograph of Olivia showed details he had never noticed. The girl wore an impeccable floral dress, and her hair was carefully combed. The woman holding her had delicate features and wore discreet jewelry, suggesting a comfortable financial situation. In the background of the image, Daniel could make out part of a large house with a well-kept garden. The photo of the twins revealed a warm family environment. They were running in a backyard with toys scattered about, and in the background there was a barbecue grill where a man was preparing food. A woman in an apron watched the scene from the kitchen door, smiling. The image conveyed happiness and stability. Emily appeared in her photograph wearing an impeccable school uniform, holding the hand of a man dressed in formal clothes. They were in front of a private school, and the girl smiled timidly at the camera. The man had features similar to hers, suggesting a close kinship. The image of Ethan as a baby was perhaps the most touching. The elderly lady holding him had a look of pure maternal love, and the setting in the background showed a simple but cozy house with flowers in the windows and baby clothes drying on the clothesline. Daniel stayed up all night, trying to understand how those photographs ended up in the abandoned train car. What connection existed between the train and the children? Why were these images preserved in that place? And more importantly, where were these people who clearly loved their children? The next morning, Daniel watched each of the children with a different look during breakfast. Olivia distributed slices of bread to the younger ones, with the same delicacy he saw in the woman from the photograph. The twins played with a contagious energy that reminded him of the joy captured in the backyard image. Emily organized the few kitchen utensils with a care that seemed learned, not natural. And Ethan, his little Ethan, had in his eyes the same sweetness he had seen on the face of the elderly lady. "Dad, Daniel, are you okay? You look worried," commented Olivia, always attentive to details. Daniel hesitated. Part of him wanted to ask if she remembered the woman from the photograph, but another part feared the answers he might receive. "I'm fine, my dear. Just thinking about some work things," he lied. "You'll find a new job soon," said Emily with conviction. "You're a very hard worker. My aunt always said that hard-working people always find a way." Daniel stopped chewing. "Aunt? What aunt, Emily?" The girl seemed confused for a moment. "I don't know. I think I dreamed it. Sometimes I have strange dreams with people I don't know, but who seem to know me." Daniel's heart raced. "And in these dreams, what is this aunt like?" "She's a pretty woman, with dark hair tied back. She always smiles at me and says she loves me very much. But it must be just imagination, right? You always said we don't have any relatives." Daniel swallowed hard. Emily's description matched perfectly with details he had observed in one of the photographs during the night. Could the children have fragmented memories of their original families? After breakfast, Daniel decided to conduct a discreet test. While the children played in the backyard, he took the photograph of Olivia and showed it only to her, away from the others. "Olivia, do you recognize anything in this picture?" The girl stared at the photo, and Daniel saw tears forming in her eyes. She gently touched the face of the woman in the image. "Where did you find this?" she whispered. "Do you remember her?" Olivia nodded slowly. "Aunt Rebecca. She used to take me for ice cream on Sundays. She said she'd come back to get me when she found a house big enough for me and my cousins. Why did she never come back, Dad, Daniel?" The revelation hit Daniel like a bolt of lightning. Olivia wasn't an orphan. She had an aunt who apparently loved her and had plans to retrieve her. But if this was true for Olivia, it was probably true for the other children as well. "Did she tell you about your parents?" Daniel asked carefully. "Mommy and Daddy had to travel far away for work. Aunt Rebecca said it would be temporary, just until they got settled. But it's been so long." Olivia's voice faltered. Daniel hugged the girl, feeling torn between relief that she had happy memories and terror at the possibility of losing her. If Rebecca was alive and still looking for Olivia, he had no legal right to the girl. In the following days, Daniel began asking subtle questions to the other children. Ethan, despite his young age, vaguely remembered a nice-smelling grandma who made little cakes and sang lullabies. The twins mentioned fragments of memories about a father who took them fishing and a mother who prepared elaborate birthday parties. Only Emily seemed to have no clear memories, but he sometimes caught her looking at the horizon with a melancholy expression, as if expecting someone. Daniel's situation became more complicated when, a week after discovering the rail car, he noticed a man watching his house from a distance. The stranger appeared at different times, always discreet, but Daniel developed a growing feeling of being watched. On Thursday morning, The man finally approached the property. Daniel was chopping wood in the backyard when he heard footsteps at the entrance to the lot. The children were playing nearby and stopped their activities upon seeing the stranger. "Good morning," said the man, a middle-aged fellow wearing simple business clothes. "My name is Stephen Harris. I'm a social worker for the region. We received an anonymous report about children living in precarious conditions at this address." Daniel felt his blood run cold. "A report? I don't understand." "My children are well cared for." Stephen looked around, observing the modest house, the children's clothes hanging on the line, and the tidy but simple backyard. "May I see the children's documentation? Birth certificates? Custody papers?" Daniel knew this moment would come someday. He had never legally formalized the children's situation. When the shelter closed, they simply stayed with him out of necessity, without official paperwork. "The children have been with me for years. I don't have formal documents, but they are happy and well treated," replied Daniel, trying to stay calm. "I understand the situation, Mr. Parker, but you must understand there is a legal protocol for cases like this. I need to assess the conditions and verify if there are biological families looking for these children." Stephen's words confirmed Daniel's worst fears. Someone was looking for the children, someone who might have seen the photographs in the rail car or knew their location. "Who made the report?" asked Daniel. "That's confidential, but I can tell you we received information that some of these children may have living biological families interested in regaining custody." Olivia approached Daniel and took his hand. The others also gathered around him, forming an instinctive protective barrier. "These are our children," said Mason, one of the twins. "Dad Daniel has been taking care of us for a long time." Stephen smiled gently. "I understand, son. But sometimes there are families who have been looking for you for years. Wouldn't it be good to reunite with people who love you?" "We already have someone who loves us," Olivia replied firmly. Daniel felt proud of the children's loyalty, but also a growing concern. If Stephen had specific information about families looking for the children, the situation was more advanced than he had imagined. "I'm going to need a few days to organize the documentation," said Daniel. "Can I have that time?" Stephen consulted a planner. "I'll have to return next week with a social worker and possibly with representatives from some families. I suggest you try to regularize the situation as soon as possible." After Stephen left, Daniel gathered the 5 children in the living room. It was time for an honest conversation, even knowing it would be painful for everyone. "Kids, you know I love you very much, don't you?" he began. They all confirmed with nods, but there was apprehension in their eyes. "There's a possibility that some of you have families who never stopped looking for you, families who loved you before you came to live with me." Ethan climbed onto Daniel's lap. "But you are our dad. We want to stay with you. And I want you to stay with me too. But we need to find out the truth about your birth families. Maybe there are people who have been suffering for years, not knowing where you are." Emily began to cry silently. "Are you going to give us away to other people?" "Never." Daniel pulled her into a hug. "But maybe we need to find a way for everyone to be happy, your birth families and you." Olivia, always mature beyond her years, asked the question Daniel feared. "How did you know we have other families?" Daniel decided to tell a simplified version of the truth. "I found some old photographs that show you with other people when you were younger, people who clearly loved you very much." The children fell silent, processing the information. Daniel realized they were scared but also curious. "Can we see those pictures?" asked Nathan. Daniel hesitated, but decided they had a right to know. He brought the photographs and spread them out on the kitchen table. Each child's reaction was unique and revealing. Olivia smiled upon seeing the image of her with Aunt Rebecca. "I remember this photo. It was on my 4th birthday. Aunt Rebecca gave me a beautiful doll. The twins got excited when they recognized themselves in the backyard photograph. "That's Dad Brandon," exclaimed Mason. "He used to grill every Sunday." "And that's Mom Michelle," completed Nathan, pointing to the woman in the kitchen doorway. "She used to make huge chocolate cakes." Emily studied her photo for a long time before speaking. "I vaguely remember this man. He used to take me to school and always bought me peppermint candies. Ethan, being the youngest, had foggier memories, but he touched the image of the elderly lady affectionately. Grandma Dorothy used to make little cookies. She had a black cat named Shadow. Each revelation was like a puzzle piece fitting into place, but also like a dagger to Daniel's heart. The children had pasts rich in love and care. They weren't abandoned orphans. They were children temporarily separated from their families by circumstances he still didn't fully understand. "What happened to these people?" asked Emily. "That's what we're going to find out," replied Daniel. That night, after putting the children to bed, Daniel decided to return to the abandoned train car. Perhaps there were more clues about the origin of the photographs and about how they ended up in that place. The train at night had an even more mysterious atmosphere, the sounds of the forest mixed with the creaks of the rusted structure. Daniel used a more powerful flashlight this time and examined every corner of the car carefully. In a side compartment that had gone unnoticed on the first visit, he found an old leather suitcase, partially hidden under wooden debris. With difficulty, he managed to pull it out and open it. Inside the suitcase were documents that made Daniel understand the situation better. It was about records of a social project called Family Bridge, which operated in the region between 2015 and 2018. The project used the train as transportation to bring together children in vulnerable situations, with temporary families willing to care for them while their birth families restructured. A specific document caught his attention. It was a list of children participating in the project, with photographs attached. All 5 children he was raising were listed, with information about their birth families and the reasons they had been temporarily removed from home. Olivia had been left in the care of the project by Aunt Rebecca, who was facing financial difficulties supporting 3 children after the girls' parents left to work in another region. The twins, Nathan and Mason, were included in the project after their parents, Brandon and Michelle, lost their home in a fire and needed to reorganize. Emily was brought by Uncle Stephen after the sudden departure of her mother, who had developed mental health problems. Ethan was registered by Grandma Dorothy, who was facing health problems and could no longer care for her grandson alone. In all cases, the separation was meant to be temporary. The families expected to regain custody of the children as soon as their situation stabilized. But something had gone wrong in the process. Daniel found correspondence that revealed what had happened. The Family Bridge project was abruptly terminated in 2018 due to administrative irregularities and funding cuts. During the closure, there was confusion in the documentation, and several children ended up being sent to different destinations without their families being properly informed. A specific letter, dated December 2018, was from a project employee to the Regional Coordinator of Social Services. The letter explained that 5 children had been informally placed in the care of a local family willing to take temporary responsibility until the legal situation was resolved. Daniel realized he was that local family. But what should have been temporary became permanent due to the bureaucratic disorganization that followed the project's closure. More importantly, there were addresses and contact information for the birth families, some updated as recently as 2019. This meant at least some of these people could still be located. Daniel spent the rest of the night reading every document, trying to fully understand the situation. It became clear that the families had never abandoned the children. They were waiting for the project to return them as promised. But when that didn't happen, they probably didn't know how to locate their children. A feeling of guilt began to consume Daniel. Unintentionally, he had kept 5 children away from families who loved them and were looking for them. Even though his intention had been genuinely good, the result was that he had prolonged a separation that should have been temporary. The next morning, Daniel made a difficult but necessary decision. He would tell the children the whole truth and begin searching for their birth families. No matter how much it might hurt him, the children had the right to be reunited with their families. "Kids, I need to tell you something very important," Daniel announced during breakfast. The 5 children stopped eating and gave their full attention. "Last night, I discovered more information about your families, and the truth is that all of them have been looking for you all these years." Olivia held Emily's hand. "All of them?" "All of them. You were never abandoned. You were temporarily separated from your families because of difficulties they were facing. But there was always the intention for you to return when things got better. Ethan climbed onto Daniel's lap. But what about you? Don't you want us anymore? Daniel's heart broke. I love you more than anything in life. You are my children in my heart. But there are people who also love you and who have suffered all these years, not knowing where you were. What's going to happen to us? Asked Nathan. We are going to find these people. We are going to talk to them. And together we will decide what is best for each of you, Daniel replied. Emily began to cry. I don't want to be separated from you all. We are a family. And we will always be a family, Daniel reassured her. But perhaps our family can become even bigger, with more people who love you. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The first attempt at contact was with Aunt Rebecca, Olivia's aunt. Daniel found an updated phone number in the documents and, after gathering courage, made the call. The woman who answered was choked up when Daniel identified himself and explained that he had been caring for Olivia for years. Olivia, my little Olivia, Rebecca cried on the phone. I looked for her everywhere. When the project closed, no one could tell me where she was. I thought I would never see her again. Daniel explained the situation and arranged a meeting for the weekend. Rebecca lives in a neighboring town 2 hours away and works as an elementary school teacher. She had become financially stable and built a house with enough space for Olivia, exactly as she had promised years ago. Olivia's reaction when she learned about the contact was mixed. She showed joy at knowing Aunt Rebecca still remembered her, but also fear of leaving the family she had known for so long. What if she doesn't like me anymore? Asked Olivia. I've changed a lot over the years. A family's love doesn't change, my dear, Daniel assured her. Aunt Rebecca has loved you since the day you were born. The meeting was set for Saturday in the town's main square. Daniel took all 5 children, as they refused to be separated for the occasion. Rebecca arrived promptly, and Daniel recognized her immediately from the photographs. She was an elegant woman of about 40, with dark hair tied in a bun and discreet professional clothes. When she saw Olivia, she couldn't hold back her tears. My little one, how you've grown, Rebecca whispered, kneeling to be at the girl's level. Olivia approached timidly, but when Rebecca opened her arms, she ran into the hug. The two held each other for several minutes, crying with emotion. Aunt, you didn't forget me, said Olivia through tears. I could never forget. Not a single day passed that I didn't think of you, Rebecca replied. The conversation between Daniel and Rebecca revealed more details about Olivia's situation. The girl's parents had moved to work on a farm in the interior of Dallas, but maintained regular contact with Rebecca during the first year. Then, there was a period of silence, and when Rebecca tried to locate them, she discovered they had moved again without leaving an address. They were very young and inexperienced, Rebecca explained. They believed in job promises that never materialized. Olivia stayed with me while they got organized, but when the project closed and she disappeared, I became desperate. Rebecca told me she spent all her savings hiring private detectives and placing ads in newspapers in several cities. She never gave up looking for her niece. And now, asked Daniel, fearful of the answer, now I want to take Olivia with me, of course. But, she looked at the other children watching the scene, I see she has a family here too. Olivia was torn. Her joy at reuniting with Aunt Rebecca was visible, but so was her anguish at the possible separation from the others. Aunt Rebecca, these are my sisters and brothers, Olivia introduced. Emily, Ethan, Nathan, and Mason, and this is Dad Daniel, who took care of all of us. Rebecca greeted each child individually, and Daniel noticed her genuine concern for the well-being of all of them, not just Olivia. Olivia, do you want to come live with me? Rebecca asked directly. The girl hesitated. I want to stay with you, Aunt, but I also don't want to leave my family here. It was then that Rebecca made an unexpected proposal. How about we start with visits? You can spend some weekends with me, get to know my house, and we'll gradually see how we adjust. It doesn't have to be a sudden change. Daniel felt relief at the suggestion. A gradual transition would be better for Olivia, and would also allow him to prepare emotionally for the possible separation. "And what about Olivia's parents?" asked Daniel. "I haven't been able to locate them yet, but now that I've found Olivia, I will intensify the search. They deserve to know their daughter is safe," replied Rebecca. Olivia's first weekend at Aunt Rebecca's house was a success. The girl came back beaming, talking about the room Rebecca had prepared for her, about the school books she had received, and about the plans they had made together. But Daniel also noticed that Olivia was different, more refined in her manners, using more elaborate words. It was as if she were gradually reclaiming an identity that had been dormant during the years with him. Inspired by the success of Olivia's reunion, Daniel decided to look for the family of the twins, Nathan and Mason. The documents indicated that the parents, Brandon and Michelle, had lost their home in a fire and needed to get back on their feet. The search was more complicated. The phone number listed in the documents no longer existed, and the address referred to the house that had been destroyed. Daniel had to do some detective work, talking to neighbors from the old residence and looking for traces of where the family had moved. It was at a bakery in the neighborhood where they used to live that Daniel found a valuable clue. The baker remembered Brandon well, who had bought bread there for years and had mentioned the twin sons, who had to be temporarily placed in the care of a social project. "Brandon still comes here sometimes," the baker said. "He and his wife got a small house on the other side of town. They work hard to save money and rebuild their lives. They always talk about the boys, wondering how they are." The baker provided the family's current address, and Daniel decided to pay a surprise visit. He took the twins with him, but didn't tell them exactly where they were going. "Dad, Daniel, where are we going?" asked Mason during the bus ride. "To visit some people who have known you since you were little," Daniel replied enigmatically. Brandon and Michelle's house was modest but well kept. There was a small garden in front with flowers and an improvised swing hanging from a tree. When Daniel rang the bell, a woman of about 35 came to the door. "Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Daniel Parker. I'm looking for Brandon and Michelle Harris," he said. "I'm Michelle. Brandon is at work, but he'll be back soon," she replied, curious about the unexpected visit. It was when Michelle saw the twins that her expression changed completely. She brought her hand to her mouth, and her eyes filled with tears. "Nathan, Mason," she whispered. The boys, who had hidden behind Daniel, now looked at him with confusion and recognition at the same time. "Mom, Michelle," said Nathan hesitantly. Michelle knelt and opened her arms. The twins ran to her, and the three hugged in the middle of the house's entryway, all crying with emotion. "My boys, my dear boys," Michelle repeated. "How you've grown." Brandon arrived from work 15 minutes later and had an equally emotional reaction. He picked up both sons at once, even though they were already big, and spun them in the air like he used to when they were little. The story that Brandon and Michelle told was one of struggle and rebuilding. After losing everything in the fire, they lived in a temporary shelter for months. Brandon found work in a neighboring town, but the salary was barely enough to support the couple. The decision to leave the twins in the Family Bridge project was the hardest of their lives, but they believed it would be temporary. "We worked day and night to get a house and the means to have you back," explained Brandon. "When we went to look for you at the project, we found it had closed. No one could tell us where you were. Michelle said they had sought help from every possible public agency, but always ran into bureaucracy and lack of information. We even hired a lawyer, but it cost the little money we had saved," she said. "We never stopped looking, we never gave up." The twins listened to the story in silence, processing information that was new to them, but explained a lot about their own feelings. "Did you abandon us?" Mason asked directly. "Never," Brandon replied firmly. "You are our sons. Everything we did was with you in mind, to give you a better life." The conversation lasted all afternoon. Brandon and Michelle wanted to know everything about the years they had missed with their sons. Daniel told them about school, the games, the first teeth that fell out, the nights of fever, the first friends. "How can we thank you?" asked Michelle. "You took care of our children when we couldn't." Daniel felt a wave of emotion. "They brought joy to my life. I should be the one thanking you for the chance to have known them." When it was time to leave, the twins were reluctant. They had reconnected with their biological parents, but they were also afraid of leaving the only life they remembered knowing. "Can we come back tomorrow?" asked Nathan. Brandon and Michelle looked at Daniel, waiting for an answer. "Of course you can," replied Daniel. "In fact, how about you spend next weekend here? That way you can get to know the new house better and talk more with Daddy Brandon and Mummy Michelle." The proposal was enthusiastically accepted by all sides. Daniel was learning that a gradual transition was truly the best path. During the trip back home, the twins were excited but also thoughtful. "Daniel, are you going to miss us?" asked Mason. "I'm going to miss you very much, but I'm also happy to know you have more people who love you," Daniel answered honestly. The next search was for Emily's family. The information in the documents indicated she had been left at the project by Uncle Stephen after her mother's mental health problems. This search would be particularly delicate due to the circumstances involved. Daniel managed to locate Stephen through the professional records of social workers in the region. Interestingly, he discovered that Stephen Harris was the same man who had visited his house the previous week, investigating the complaint about the children's conditions. The revelation was shocking. Stephen was not just a social worker investigating a random report. He was specifically looking for Emily, his niece. Daniel arranged a new meeting with Stephen, this time revealing he had information about Emily. The meeting took place at the same location as the first time, but now with Emily present. When Stephen saw Emily, his reaction was pure emotion. "Emily, my little Emily." The girl vaguely remembered her uncle, but wasn't sure. It took a few minutes of conversation for the memories to begin to return. "Uncle Stephen, you used to buy me mint candies," said Emily timidly. "And you always asked me to tell the story of the bluebird," replied Stephen with tears in his eyes. Emily's story was more complex than the others. Her mother, Jennifer, had developed severe depression after Emily's father left. Stephen temporarily assumed care of his niece, but his own professional responsibilities made it difficult to maintain custody. "When I left Emily at the project, Jennifer was in treatment. I visited regularly and had plans to get Emily as soon as Jennifer improved," explained Stephen. "But when the project closed abruptly, Emily simply disappeared from the system." Daniel then understood why Stephen had appeared investigating his situation. He wasn't following a random report. He was following leads in the search for his niece. "How did you find us?" asked Daniel. "I spent years investigating the project's closure. Recently I gained access to the old files and found a reference to children being placed with a local family. I began investigating families in the area who might have informally taken in children," explained Stephen. The situation of Jennifer, Emily's mother, was delicate. Stephen explained that she had improved significantly with treatment, but the trauma of having lost her daughter had affected her recovery. Jennifer never forgave herself for not being able to care for Emily. She believed her daughter was lost forever, Stephen recounted. Emily listened to the explanation seriously. "Is my mother sick?" "She was sick, but now she's much better, and she loves you very much, Emily." "She never stopped thinking about you," replied Stephen. The reunion between Emily and Jennifer was the most delicate of all. Jennifer was a fragile-looking woman, but with eyes that shone intensely when she saw her daughter. "Emily, my little one, forgive Mommy," were Jennifer's first words. Emily slowly approached her mother, studying her face. "Why did you leave me?" "Because I was very sick and couldn't take care of you properly. But now I'm well, and I really want you to come home with me," replied Jennifer. The reconnection process between Emily and Jennifer was gradual. Emily needed to understand her mother's illness, and Jennifer needed to rebuild her daughter's trust. Stephen served as a mediator, helping both adapt to the new reality. Daniel observed that Emily was more reserved than the other children regarding the family reunion. She seemed to have more difficulty processing the emotions and accepting the explanations about the past. "It's normal for her to be hesitant," explained Stephen. "Emily was affected more deeply by the separation because she was older and partially understood what was happening." The search for the family of Ethan, the youngest, revealed the most touching situation of all. Grandma Dorothy, mentioned in the documents, had been located in a nursing home in the region, where she had lived for 2 years due to the worsening of her health problems. When Daniel and Ethan visited the nursing home, they found a 72-year-old lady, physically debilitated but mentally lucid. Dorothy was sitting in a wheelchair in the institution's garden when she saw them arriving. Her reaction was one of disbelief, followed by overflowing joy. "Ethan, my little grandson, you've grown so much!" Ethan ran to his grandmother's lap, and despite her physical limitations, Dorothy hugged him with all her strength. "Grandma, are you sick?" asked Ethan with the innocence of a 6-year-old. "Grandma is a little tired, sweetheart, but now that you're here, Grandma is already feeling better," replied Dorothy. The head nurse at the nursing home explained Dorothy's situation to Daniel. She had developed diabetes and heart problems that required constant care. The family didn't have the resources for home care, so Dorothy was transferred to the nursing home. "She talks about her grandson every day," the nurse said. "He's her main motivation to keep taking care of herself." Dorothy explained to Daniel that she had given Ethan to the project when she realized she could no longer properly care for him. "I would cook beans and forget the stove was on. Once Ethan almost got hurt because I left a hot pan within his reach," Dorothy said through tears. "I was afraid something would happen to him because of my forgetfulness." Dorothy's condition was irreversible. She would need permanent medical care, and there was no possibility of resuming custody of Ethan. But she wanted to maintain regular contact with her grandson. "Can Ethan visit Grandma always?" Dorothy asked Daniel. "Of course he can. And you can visit him too, whenever you feel well," replied Daniel. Ethan, being the youngest, adapted more easily to the situation. For him, simply gaining a loving grandmother was a positive thing, without the emotional complexity the other children faced. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. With 4 of the 5 families located, Daniel found himself in a complex situation. Each child was gradually reconnecting with their roots, but the process was creating new emotional and practical challenges. Olivia had spent 3 weekends with Aunt Rebecca and was visibly happier and more confident. Rebecca had even managed to contact Olivia's parents, who now worked in a nearby city, and were eager to reunite with their daughter. The twins Nathan and Mason were splitting their time between the 2 homes, but Daniel noticed they were leaning more and more toward staying with Brandon and Michelle. The original family bonds were strengthening quickly. Emily maintained regular visits with Jennifer and Stephen, but still showed hesitation about permanent changes. She seemed to be testing the limits of her mother's patience, as if she wanted to be sure Jennifer wouldn't abandon her again. Ethan visited Grandma Dorothy twice a week at the nursing home and always came back beaming from these visits. For him, the situation was simple. He had gained one more person who loved him. It was during one of these routine visits that Dorothy provided information that would change everything. "Daniel, you've been an angel in my Ethan's life," said Dorothy, "but I wanted to tell you something about how he ended up in the project." "What is it, Mrs. Dorothy?" asked Daniel. "Ethan wasn't an orphan when he came to me. He had a mother, a very young woman who couldn't take care of him," revealed Dorothy. Daniel felt the ground move beneath his feet. "What do you mean?" Dorothy explained that Ethan's biological mother, a 17-year-old girl named Amanda, had appeared at her door with the baby, desperate and without resources. The girl was pregnant again and couldn't afford to raise 2 children. "She asked me to take care of Ethan temporarily. She said she would come back when she got her life in order," Dorothy recounted. "But I never saw her again." Daniel realized there was one more family to find. Ethan had a biological mother somewhere, possibly with other children. The search for Amanda was the most difficult of all. Dorothy provided only a name and a vague physical description. There were no official documents or addresses. Daniel decided to search through birth records in the region, trying to find children born around the time Ethan would have had a younger sibling. It was a painstaking task that took weeks. The definitive clue came through a basic health unit in the area. A nurse remembered a young woman named Amanda, who had given birth to 2 children a few years apart, and mentioned having an older son who didn't live with her. The address in the medical records led Daniel to a simple house on the outskirts of the city. When a young woman of about 22 answered the door, Daniel knew immediately he was looking at Ethan's mother. Amanda had the same expressive eyes as Ethan, and the same way of tilting her head when thinking. When Daniel introduced himself and mentioned Ethan, she began to cry. "Ethan, My first baby. Is he okay? She asked between sobs. He's great. He's a happy and healthy child, replied Daniel. Amanda invited Daniel in and introduced her other two children, Sarah, age 4, and Tyler, age 2. The house was modest but tidy, and the children seemed well cared for. I was very young when Ethan was born, explained Amanda. I didn't have a job or a place of my own. I was living in my aunt's house as a favor, and she didn't want another crying baby. When I got pregnant with Sarah, I couldn't take care of both of them anymore. Amanda said she had always intended to find Ethan once she got on her feet, but she was afraid he wouldn't recognize her anymore, and that people would judge her choices. Mrs. Dorothy said he was being well cared for, so I thought it was better to leave things as they were, she admitted. But not a day went by that I didn't think of him. Amanda's situation was completely different from when Ethan was born. She had finished high school, gotten a job as a cleaning assistant, and rented a small but suitable house for her family. "Do you want to meet Ethan?" asked Daniel. "More than anything in the world, but I'm afraid he won't want to meet me," replied Amanda. Daniel explained that Ethan was an adaptable and affectionate child and would likely be happy to meet his biological mother and siblings. The first meeting between Ethan and Amanda was carefully planned. Daniel took Ethan to meet a special person, without explaining exactly who it was. When Amanda saw Ethan, she knelt down and looked at him for a long moment, as if wanting to memorize every detail. "Hello, Ethan," she said softly. Ethan, always sociable, responded with a smile. "Hi, what's your name?" "My name is Amanda, and these are Sarah and Tyler," she introduced, indicating the two children watching shyly. Ethan was fascinated to discover he had younger siblings. He played with Sarah and Tyler for hours, showing the generosity and patience Daniel had come to admire in him. It was only at the end of the visit that Daniel explained to Ethan who Amanda really was. "Ethan, Amanda is your mother. You were born from her belly," Daniel said gently. Ethan looked at Amanda with curiosity, showing no shock or rejection. "Why didn't you live with me before?" Amanda knelt down to his level. "Because I was too young and didn't know how to properly take care of a baby. But now I've learned, and I really want to learn how to be your mother." Ethan considered this for a moment. "Will you take care of me like Dad Daniel does?" "I will take care of you with all the love I have in my heart," promised Amanda. Ethan's integration with his biological family was surprisingly natural. He loved discovering he had siblings and adapted quickly to Amanda's family dynamic. But Daniel realized this discovery created a new dilemma. With all 5 children having identified biological families interested in resuming custody, he faced the real possibility of being completely alone. The situation reached a critical point when Stephen, the social worker, scheduled a formal meeting to discuss the future of all the children. Present were Daniel, Stephen, and representatives from all the found biological families. "We need to formalize the legal situation of each child," announced Stephen. "Mr. Daniel has cared for them informally, but now that we've located the families of origin, we need to regularize custody." Rebecca was the first to speak. "I would like to resume legal custody of Olivia. I can offer quality education and financial stability." Brandon and Michelle confirmed their desire to have the twins back. "They are our children. We are now in a position to care for them properly." Jennifer, supported by Stephen, expressed her wish to rebuild the relationship with Emily. "I want to prove to my daughter that I can be the mother she deserves." Amanda asked to assume custody of Ethan and integrate him into the family with Sarah and Tyler. Only the situation with Ethan and Grandma Dorothy remained undefined, as she was not in a position to resume care. Daniel listened to all the requests in silence, feeling his world crumbling. Legally, he had no rights over any of the children. Emotionally, he was about to lose everything he loved most in life. "And what is the children's opinion on this?" Daniel finally asked. Stephen agreed that the children should be heard. One by one, they expressed their conflicting feelings. Olivia wanted to stay with Aunt Rebecca, but also didn't want to be separated from her adoptive siblings. The twins wanted to return to Brandon and Michelle, but feared hurting Daniel. Emily still had doubts about living with Jennifer. Ethan was excited to live with his biological siblings, but also loved Daniel and Grandma Dorothy. It was Emily who verbalized what they were all feeling. Can't we all stay together somehow? Emily's question planted a seed of an idea in everyone's mind. Rebecca was the first to explore it. What if we found a way to keep the children connected, even if they live with their biological families, she suggested. Stephen, with his experience in complex custody cases, began outlining legal possibilities. There are models of shared custody and extended visitation that could work in this case. Brandon had a practical idea. What if we all lived in the same area? That way the children could visit each other regularly. The discussion went on for hours, with each family contributing suggestions. Slowly, a plan that could benefit everyone began to emerge. Amanda made an unexpected proposal. "Daniel, would you like to live with us? I can arrange a room in the house, and you could help care for all the children." The offer deeply touched Daniel, but he realized it wouldn't be a sustainable long-term solution. It was Aunt Rebecca who presented the idea that would change everything. As a teacher, she had knowledge about social projects and community initiatives. What if we created something like a community center where all the families could meet regularly, she proposed. The children would have their biological families, but also maintain the bonds between them. The idea evolved during the conversation. Stephen knew of abandoned properties in the area that could be renovated for social projects. Brandon had construction experience and could help with renovations. Jennifer, who was recovering, could contribute with volunteer work. Amanda could help with cleaning and organization. And the perfect location would be the old train station where it all began, suggested Daniel. The proposal was met with enthusiasm by everyone. The train station, which had been the starting point for the family's separation, could become the symbol of their reunion. In the following months, all the families worked together to renovate the old station. The project gained support from the local city hall and regional business owners who were moved by the story. Olivia officially went to live with Aunt Rebecca, but spent afternoons at the community center helping other children with their schoolwork. The twins returned to Brandon and Michelle, but actively participated in the center's activities on weekends. Emily gradually adapted to life with Jennifer, using the center as a transitional space whenever she needed. Ethan divided his time between Amanda's house with his siblings and visits to Grandma Dorothy, who became a sort of matriarch of the project. Daniel became the official coordinator of the community center, receiving a modest but sufficient salary for his livelihood. More importantly, he maintained daily contact with all 5 children. The center offered educational activities, space for family meetings, and support for other families in the region facing similar situations. The old train car where Daniel had found the photographs was transformed into a children's library. During the official inauguration of the center, all the families gathered for a group photo. The children were radiant, surrounded by multiple parental figures who loved them. Daniel observed the scene with a feeling of completeness he had never experienced before. Olivia approached him during the ceremony. "Dad Daniel, thank you for taking care of all of us and for helping us find our families." "Thank you for giving my life meaning, my daughter," replied Daniel. Emily, who had become one of the most active children at the center, had an idea that perfectly summarized everyone's situation. "Now we have big families. Each of us has at least 3 or 4 dads and moms." Ethan, always practical, added, "And a bunch of brothers and sisters too." The twins, now 10 years old, had matured greatly throughout the whole process. Nathan made an observation that touched all the adults present. "Before we only had Dad Daniel. Now we have a huge family, but Dad Daniel is still special to all of us." The transformation was not limited to just the 5 original children. The community center began serving other families in vulnerable situations, offering temporary support, family mediation, and educational programs. Rebecca developed a literacy program for adults. Brandon and Michelle created construction and carpentry workshops. Jennifer, having completely overcome her depression through volunteer work, coordinated artistic activities. Amanda organized community integration events. Stephen provided free legal guidance for families in need. Grandma Dorothy, even with her physical limitations, became the center's official storyteller. The children in the region loved listening to her on Thursday afternoons. 2 years after the discovery of the photographs in the abandoned train car, Daniel reflected on how his life had changed. He had not lost 5 children as he had initially feared. Instead, he had gained an extended family of more than 20 people who considered him important and beloved. The 5 children visited Daniel daily at the center. They did their schoolwork at the table where he worked, told him about their day, asked for advice about typical childhood and teenage problems. For all practical purposes, Daniel continued to be a central father figure in their lives. Olivia, now 14, excelled at the private school where she studied with Aunt Rebecca. She had also discovered a natural talent for mediating conflicts between the younger children at the center. Her biological parents had finally been located and established regular contact, but she chose to remain with Rebecca for educational stability reasons. The twins, Nathan and Mason, had become leaders among the children at the center. They organized games, helped with space maintenance, and demonstrated impressive maturity for their 11 years. Their relationship with Brandon and Michelle had solidified completely, but they maintained a special connection with Daniel. Emily, now 10 years old, had overcome her doubts about Jennifer. Mother and daughter developed a solid relationship based on open communication and mutual patience. Emily became one of the most empathetic children at the center, always willing to help new participants who arrived scared or confused. Ethan, at 8 years old, was the most sociable personality among the 5 children. He moved easily between Amanda's house, visits to Grandma Dorothy, and activities at the center. His adaptability became an example for other children in family transition situations. The story of the 5 children and the community center began to attract attention from other regions. Delegations of social workers and public managers visited the site to understand the service model that had been developed. Daniel was invited to lecture on innovative solutions for vulnerable families. In his presentations, he always emphasized that the project's success was due to the willingness of all families involved to put the children's well-being above their own needs. During one of these lectures, Daniel met Elizabeth, a psychologist specializing in family therapy, who was interested in the center's work. Elizabeth began offering her services voluntarily, helping families deal with complex custody and relationship issues. Elizabeth's arrival brought a new dimension to the center. She established support groups for parents in situations similar to what Daniel had faced, people who cared for children informally and needed to regularize legal situations. Elizabeth also created a family reunification preparation program, helping children and biological parents reconnect healthily after prolonged separations. The joint work of Daniel and Elizabeth at the center evolved into a personal partnership. They discovered affinities that went beyond their common professional interest. Elizabeth admired Daniel's dedication to the children, and he respected her technical knowledge and emotional sensitivity. The 5 children observed the development of the relationship between Daniel and Elizabeth with approval and curiosity. Olivia was the first to comment on the change in Daniel's behavior. "Dad, Daniel seems happier lately," she observed during one of the afternoons at the center. Emily agreed. "He smiles more and seems less worried." Ethan, with his typical childish frankness, asked the direct question. "Dad, Daniel, do you like Aunt Elizabeth?" Daniel felt his face grow warm. "Elizabeth is a very special person and a great professional." "That doesn't answer our question," insisted Nathan. Mason added, "We want you to be happy, Dad, Daniel. If you like Aunt Elizabeth, you can date her." The children's approval meant a lot to Daniel. He had spent so much time focused on their well-being that he had almost forgotten his own emotional needs. Elizabeth had also noticed the special affection the 5 children had for Daniel. During her individual therapeutic sessions with each of them, Daniel's name always appeared as a constant positive reference. "Daniel is a very special person," Elizabeth commented during a private conversation with Rebecca. "He managed to be both father and mother to 5 children without losing each one's individuality." Rebecca, who had observed Daniel since their first meeting, agreed. "He has a natural gift for understanding children's needs. Olivia speaks of him with an affection and respect I rarely see in parent-child relationships." The relationship between Daniel and Elizabeth developed naturally over the months. They worked side by side at the center, shared meals with the families, and discovered they had similar views on education and childcare. The 5 children became informal cupids. always creating situations for Daniel and Elizabeth to be alone, or making comments that highlighted their compatibility. During the 3rd anniversary of the community centre, Daniel finally found the courage to ask Elizabeth out to dinner outside of a professional context. The invitation was made in front of all the children, who applauded and cheered with joy when she accepted. Daniel and Elizabeth's first official date was a family event for the 5 children. They helped Daniel choose his clothes, gave advice on where to take Elizabeth, and stayed up late, waiting for him to return to tell them how it went. "So?" asked Olivia as soon as Daniel walked in the door. "It was really nice," he replied, smiling. "That's it," protested Emily. "We want details." Daniel laughed. "Elizabeth is a wonderful person, and you know she likes all of you very much too." Ethan climbed onto Daniel's lap. "Is Aunt Elizabeth going to be our new mom?" The question took Daniel by surprise. "Easy, Ethan. We're still getting to know each other better." "But do you want her to be?" the boy insisted. Daniel looked at the 5 anxious faces waiting for his answer. "I would very much like Elizabeth to be part of our family, but that's a decision she needs to make too." The following months were of public courtship, approved by the entire centre community. Elizabeth integrated naturally into Daniel's routine with the 5 children, attending school meetings, family events, and centre activities. She also developed individual relationships with each child, respecting the special bond they had with Daniel, but offering a maternal support that had been missing in their lives. The children's biological families also approved of Elizabeth. Rebecca commented that Olivia had mentioned finally having a centre mom who complimented the aunt at home. Brandon and Michelle observed that the twins spoke of Elizabeth with affection and respect. Jennifer thanked Elizabeth for helping Emily deal with emotional issues she didn't yet know how to approach. Amanda said Ethan had gained another maternal figure to admire. Grandma Dorothy, always wise, made a comment that summed up the situation perfectly. "That young lady completed the family you built. Now Ethan has Dad Daniel and Mom Elizabeth at the centre, in addition to all the rest of us." Daniel's marriage proposal to Elizabeth was a community event. He organized a surprise party at the centre, inviting all the families and children served by the project. During the highlight of the celebration, Daniel knelt in the middle of the main hall and proposed to Elizabeth in front of more than 50 people who had become his extended family. Elizabeth accepted amid tears and enthusiastic applause. The 5 children ran to hug them simultaneously, creating a human mountain of joy and emotion. The wedding took place 6 months later, in the very renovated train station. The ceremony was officiated by the local priest, but the event was completely organized by the centre's families. Olivia was the maid of honor. The twins carried the rings. Emily scattered petals along the path. Ethan was the official ring-bearer. All the other children from the centre participated in the choir that sang during the bride's entrance. The biological families of the 5 children sat in the front row alongside Daniel and Elizabeth's few relatives. The distinction between biological family and chosen family had completely disappeared. Everyone was simply family. During the wedding vows, Daniel dedicated special words to the 5 children. "Olivia, Nathan, Mason, Emily and Ethan, you taught me that family isn't just about blood, but about love, dedication, and daily choices to care for one another. Thank you for making me a father before I even knew it was possible." Elizabeth also addressed the children. "You 5 are proof that love multiplies when it's shared. I promise to be the best mother at heart I can be for you, always respecting the wonderful families you already have." The wedding celebration lasted into the early hours, with music, dancing, and plenty of food prepared collectively by the families. The children played until they were exhausted, and many ended up sleeping on the refurbished benches of the old train car. Daniel and Elizabeth's honeymoon was a 3-day trip to a nearby inn, but they made sure to return in time so as not to miss the weekly Friday meeting at the centre. Married life brought a new stability for Daniel and Elizabeth. They rented a house near the centre with enough space to host the 5 children whenever they wanted or needed. The guest room became a shared dormitory for occasions when all the children decided to sleep over at Daniel and Elizabeth's house. These nights were frequent, especially on weekends or during school vacations. Elizabeth brought professional organization to Daniel's work. She systematized the center's services, created protocols for new cases, and established partnerships with universities for research on alternative childcare models. The center began receiving federal funds as a pilot project for innovative family support. With proper funding, they could hire more professionals and expand the services offered. Daniel became a nationally recognized expert in shared custody and family reunification. He traveled across the country, giving lectures and consulting on the implementation of similar projects. Elizabeth completed a master's degree in family psychology, using the center as the basis for her research on children's resilience in custody transition situations. The 5 children remained the emotional core of the entire structure. Now teenagers and pre-teens, they had developed distinct personalities, but maintained a special connection with each other and with Daniel and Elizabeth. Olivia, at 16, had become a student leader at school. She planned to study law to work on family and childhood issues. On weekends, she helped Daniel and Elizabeth with new cases at the center, showing impressive maturity in handling complex situations. The twins, at 13, had developed different interests for the first time. Nathan was interested in construction, influenced by his dad Brandon, and intended to study engineering. Mason had discovered a passion for communication and wanted to be a journalist to tell stories like theirs. They remained inseparable, but respected each other's individuality. Emily, at 12, had completely overcome the traumas of her childhood. She had become a talented artist, painting pictures that depicted families of various configurations. Her works decorated the center and had been sold at charity events. Her relationship with Jennifer had solidified completely, but Emily also considered Elizabeth a second mother. Ethan, at 10, continued to be the most sociable personality in the group. He had become the official ambassador of the center, welcoming visitors and telling the family's story to researchers and journalists. His ease in moving between different family environments made him a role model for other children in similar situations. All 5 children demonstrated emotional and academic stability. They had good grades in school, healthy relationships with peers, and a positive outlook on the future. During an annual evaluation meeting at the center, Elizabeth presented data that impressed the funders. The 5 original children showed psychosocial development indicators above the national average in all categories assessed. "What explains these exceptional results?" asked one of the evaluators. Elizabeth looked at Daniel before answering. They had multiple sources of love and support throughout their childhood. Each one has at least 4 active parental figures in their lives, plus a network of chosen siblings. They learned that family is about choice and commitment, not just biology, Daniel added, and they never had to choose between their different families. We all worked together to ensure they felt loved and secure in every environment. The model developed at Daniel and Elizabeth Center began to be replicated in other regions of the United States. Universities created courses on extended families based on their experience. Public policies began to incorporate concepts of multiple guardianship and community support for vulnerable families. The 5 children, now teenagers, became informal spokespeople for the movement. They participated in academic conferences, gave interviews to media outlets, and helped train new professionals. During one of these conferences, Olivia gave a speech that moved the audience of experts. Many adults think children need only one father and one mother to be happy. We are proof that children can have many fathers and mothers and be even happier. What matters is not how many people care for you, but how much love exists in that care. Ethan, always spontaneous, added, "And we were lucky because all our families learned to work together. That made the difference." The story of the 5 children continued to inspire families in similar situations. The center received letters from across the country, telling stories of successful family reunification based on the model they had developed. Daniel and Elizabeth decided to write a book about their experience. The book, titled 5 Photographs, A Story of Multiplied Family, became a bestseller and was adopted as required reading in social work and family psychology courses. The book's royalties were allocated to the center, allowing for the creation of a permanent fund to maintain its activities. 10 years after the discovery of the photographs in the abandoned train car, Daniel reflected on the extraordinary journey they had undertaken. The lonely man looking for firewood in the forest had become a father to 5 children, husband to a wonderful woman, and coordinator of a project benefiting hundreds of families. The 5 children, now young adults, remained the center of his life. Olivia was in law school, but returned every weekend to help at the center. The twins were in high school and had clear plans for the future. Emily had won an arts scholarship, but continued living in the area to stay close to her extended family. Ethan was finishing middle school and showed interest in following in Daniel's footsteps in social work. They all called Daniel Dad and Elizabeth Mom, but also maintained solid relationships with their biological families. The distinction had become irrelevant. They simply had many people who loved them. During the celebration of the center's 10th anniversary, all the families gathered for a special party. The event was attended by local authorities, university representatives, and families who had benefited from the project over the years. The 5 original photographs that Daniel had found in the train car were framed and placed on a special wall at the center, alongside hundreds of other photographs documenting the journey of every family served. Daniel gave an emotional speech during the ceremony. 10 years ago, I found 5 photographs that scared me because I thought I would lose my children. Today I know those photographs didn't represent a threat but an opportunity. They showed me that my children had even more people who loved them than I had imagined. Elizabeth added, and we learned that love doesn't diminish when it's divided, it multiplies. Each of these children has more love in their lives because all of their families chose to work together. Olivia, now 22, asked to speak on behalf of the 5. Dad Daniel, when you found those photos, you must have been afraid of losing us. But what really happened was that you helped us gain even more family. You never stopped being our dad. You just helped us discover we had room in our hearts for even more love. Ethan, at 16, made a comment that perfectly summarized the entire journey. If anyone asks how many fathers and mothers I have, I answer, all the ones I need. And if they ask who my family is, I say, everyone in this room. The audience rose in an emotional standing ovation. Many people were crying, moved by the simplicity and depth of the young man's words. The community center continued to grow and evolve. New programs were created, partnerships were established with international organizations, and the American model of multiplied family began to be studied in other countries. Daniel and Elizabeth became international consultants, traveling to share their experience with professionals from various countries. But they always returned home quickly, eager to reunite with their 5 children and the community they had built together. The original children began forming their own families. Olivia married at 25 to a college classmate who also worked in family law. The couple decided to live near the center to be able to contribute to the project. When Olivia became pregnant with her first child, she announced the news during a Sunday family gathering. Our family is going to grow even more, and this baby will have more grandparents, aunts, uncles, and godparents than any child in the world. Daniel and Elizabeth would be grandparents, as would Rebecca, Brandon, Michelle, and all the other members of the extended family. The tradition of multiplied love would continue for the next generation. The twins, at 21, had followed their professional dreams but remained close. Nathan worked as an engineer at a local construction company and helped with renovations and expansions of the center. Mason had become a journalist and documented the stories of all the families served by the project. Emily, at 20, had become a regionally recognized artist. Her paintings about non-conventional families were exhibited in galleries and museums. She used her art to raise awareness about different family models. Ethan, at 18, had decided to study psychology to follow in Elizabeth's footsteps. He wanted to specialize in family therapy and work with children in custody transition situations. All 5 original children continued to participate actively in the center, now as adult volunteers. They helped with new cases, shared their experiences with other families, and demonstrated that the multiplied family model truly worked in the long term. During an interview for an international documentary about alternative family models, Daniel was asked what had been the most important moment of the entire journey. He thought for a moment before answering, "It was when I realized I wasn't losing 5 children, but gaining dozens of family members." when I understood that love isn't a limited resource that needs to be divided, but something that grows when it is shared. Elizabeth added, and the most beautiful part is seeing that our 5 children learned that lesson perfectly. They don't compete for the love of the different families. They celebrate having so much love available. The documentary, when it aired, generated worldwide interest in the American model. Delegations from various countries visited the center to study how to replicate the experience in their own cultural contexts. Daniel and Elizabeth were invited to speak at the UN about children's rights and alternative models of childcare. During the lecture, they showed current photographs of the 5 children, now successful and emotionally stable young adults. These 5 people are proof that children can thrive in non-conventional family settings as long as there is love, stability, and cooperation among all the adults involved, said Elizabeth to the international audience. Daniel concluded, "They taught me that family is a verb, not a noun. It's something you do every day, not something you simply are." The UN lecture led to the creation of an international protocol for situations of multiple custody and family reunification based on the experience developed at Daniel and Elizabeth Center. Years later, when Daniel turned 60, the 5 children organized a surprise party that brought together hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by the project. During the party, a video was shown featuring testimonials from children and families who had been helped by the center over the years. Each testimonial reinforced the positive impact of the extended family model. Olivia, now a mother of 2, gave an emotional speech. "Dad, Daniel, you always said we changed your life. But in truth, you changed many more lives than you can imagine. Your grandchildren will grow up knowing that family is about choice and love, not about biology. And they will teach that to their children too." Daniel moved, looked around the room full of people who had become his family over the years. The 5 photographs that had once frightened him in the abandoned train car had multiplied into hundreds of smiling faces surrounding him. "You 5 were the greatest gift life gave me," he said. "But the second greatest gift was discovering that you had even more people who loved you, and that all those people could become my family too." Elizabeth held her husband's hand as she watched the scene. The 5 children who had once arrived, scared and confused at the center, were now confident adults leading their own families, but who had never lost the special connection between each other and with their heart parents. Ethan, the youngest, now 22 and recently graduated in psychology, made the final comment, "Dad, Daniel, you always said you found us by chance in that abandoned train. But I don't think it was chance, I think it was destiny. You needed a family, and we needed a father who understood that family can take many different forms." The party continued into the late hours, with music, dancing, and many stories shared. The children from the current center played with the children of the 5 original kids, perpetuating the tradition of multiplied love. When everyone had finally left, Daniel and Elizabeth walked to the old train car, now transformed into the center's library. They sat on the refurbished benches and looked at the walls where the photographs had been found. "Do you regret anything?" asked Elizabeth. Daniel thought for a moment. "I regret being afraid when I found those photographs. If I had understood from the beginning that they represented an opportunity, not a problem, it might have been easier for the children. But you did what you thought was right at the time, and, in the end, everything worked out for the best," replied Elizabeth. "That's true," agreed Daniel. "And you? And do you regret anything?" Elizabeth smiled. "I regret not having met you all sooner. I wish I had been part of more of the children's childhood moments. But you were part of the most important moments," said Daniel. "You helped them become the wonderful adults they are today." They were silent for a few minutes, reflecting on the extraordinary journey they had lived together. "Daniel, do you think other families can replicate what we did here?" asked Elizabeth. "I think so, as long as they are willing to put the children's well-being above their own insecurities," he replied. "The secret wasn't any special technique. It was simply deciding that the children's love was more important than our adult vanities." Elizabeth agreed. "And having the courage to admit that we didn't know everything, that we needed to learn from the biological families and from the children themselves." The center continued operating and growing years after this conversation. Daniel and Elizabeth gradually retired from daily activities, but continued as consultants and mentors. The 5 original children took on leadership roles in the project. Olivia became the legal coordinator, offering free advice to families in the reunification process. Nathan led the infrastructure and expansion part. Mason documented and publicized the success stories. Emily coordinated the artistic and therapeutic activities. Ethan took over the general coordination of psychological services. The model had become self-sustaining, managed by the very people who had benefited from it in childhood. During a strategic planning meeting, Ethan made an observation that showed how they had internalized the values learned. Our goal should not be just to reunite families. It should be to create even larger and stronger families, where all children have multiple sources of love and support. Olivia added, and to teach other communities that family is not a fixed structure. It's something alive that can grow and adapt as needs change. The center began offering training courses for professionals from other states and countries. The American model of multiplied family spread across various continents, always adapted to local cultural realities. Daniel and Elizabeth, now in their 70s, continued living near the center. They were grandparents to 12 grandchildren, children of the 5 original kids, and great-grandparents to 3 great-grandchildren. All generations gathered monthly for family lunches that could have over 50 participants. The tables were huge, set up in the center's main hall, and the food was prepared collectively by all the families. During one of these lunches, Olivia's oldest grandson, now 10 years old, asked a question that amused everyone present. "Grandpa Daniel, how many people are really part of our family?" Daniel laughed. "Son, I've lost count. But I can tell you one thing. It's all the people you need and all the people who need you." The boy considered the answer. "So our family is the size of our love?" "Exactly," replied Daniel. "And since our love has no limit, our family has no limit either." The conversation was recorded by Mason, who now maintained a complete audio-visual archive of the extended family's history. He planned to produce a documentary series for television telling the evolution of the experience over 3 decades. Elizabeth, observing the scene, had a reflection she shared with Daniel that night. "Do you realize that those 5 photographs you found in the train car changed not only our lives, but potentially thousands of other lives around the world?" Daniel nodded. "And to think I almost didn't enter that car because I was afraid of the monkeys." They laughed together, remembering the irony of how small moments can change entire trajectories. "Daniel, what do you think is the most important legacy we leave?" asked Elizabeth. He thought carefully before answering. "I think it's the proof that love is not a scarce resource, that children can have many fathers and mothers without it causing confusion or conflict. That family is about conscious daily choice, not about biology." Elizabeth added, "And that when adults put children's well-being above their own egos, miracles can happen." The community center became a city historical landmark, officially recognized as the birthplace of an innovative model of family care. A plaque at the entrance recorded the history of the 5 photographs and the 5 children who changed the understanding of family in the region. Academic tourists from various parts of the world visited the site regularly. The visits always included a stop at the old train car, where it all began, and a presentation made by the original 5 children themselves, now respected adults in their fields. During one of these presentations, an international visitor asked, "What was the most important factor for the success of this experience?" Ethan, now the center's general coordinator, answered, "It was understanding that the problem wasn't having too many families. The problem would be having too few families. The more people who love a child, the safer and more confident they become." Emily added, "And it was all the adults learning to work as a team. Our biological families and our heart parents never competed with each other. They collaborated." The presentation always ended with a tour of the photography exhibition documenting the evolution of all the families served by the center over the years. The 5 original photographs occupied a central place, surrounded by thousands of others showing happy children in diverse family configurations. Mason produced a special documentary to mark the 25th anniversary of the discovery of the photographs. The film followed each of the original 5 children in their current lives, showing how they had become stable and happy adults. The documentary also included interviews with international experts explaining how the American model had influenced public policies in various countries. During the documentary's premiere held at the center itself, Daniel gave a speech that summarized his life philosophy. 25 years ago, 5 photographs taught me that I knew nothing about family. Today, after raising dozens of heart children and heart grandchildren, I know that I still know nothing about family. But I learned that we don't need to know everything. We just need to be willing to love without limits and to learn from the children themselves. Elizabeth, at his side, added, "And we learned that miracles happen when ordinary people decide to do extraordinary things driven by love." The original 5 children, now in their 30s, continued to live in the region and participate actively in the life of the center. Their children grew up with the same philosophy of multiplied family, having dozens of uncles, aunts, grandparents, and godparents. The 3rd generation of the extended family showed the same positive development indicators that had characterized the original 5 children. They were secure, empathetic, sociable, and had an expanded view of the family concept. During a meeting of the center's advisory board, Olivia, now a lawyer specializing in family law, presented data that impressed everyone present. Our children show rates of depression, anxiety, and antisocial behavior significantly lower than the national average, and rates of empathy, cooperation, and resilience significantly higher. Nathan, as the engineer responsible for infrastructure, reported that the model had expanded to 15 similar centers in different states across the United States, serving over 1,000 families annually. Mason, through his journalistic work, had documented more than 300 stories of successful family reunification based on the original model. Emily, with her art, had created traveling exhibitions that raised community awareness about the importance of supporting families in vulnerable situations. Ethan, as a psychologist, had developed specific therapeutic protocols for children transitioning between families, protocols now used nationwide. Each of the 5 children had found their own unique way to contribute to the perpetuation and expansion of the model that had transformed their own lives. Daniel and Elizabeth, entering their 80s, remained active and sharp. They were regularly consulted by researchers, public administrators, and families in complex situations. During an interview to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the discovery of the photographs, Daniel was asked what his biggest surprise had been throughout the journey. "My biggest surprise was discovering that I wasn't special," he replied, causing astonishment in the interviewer. He explained, "For years I thought I had done something extraordinary by caring for the 5 children. Later I understood that anyone can do what I did, as long as they are willing to put the children's well-being above their own needs. Love isn't a talent, it's a choice." Elizabeth added, "And our other surprise was discovering that children are far more resilient and adaptable than adults imagine. They adapted to having multiple families much more easily than we adults adapted to sharing the role of parents." The interviewer asked what advice they would give to families in similar situations. Ethan, participating in the interview, answered, "Trust the children. They have the capacity to love many people simultaneously without getting confused. The problem is never the children. It's the adults who create unnecessary competition." Olivia added, "And remember that family isn't a zero-sum game. When a child gains one more person who loves them, they don't lose love for the others. They simply have more love available." The interview was widely disseminated and generated hundreds of contacts from families interested in learning about the model or in implementing similar projects in their regions. The center began offering online courses for families and professionals from all over the world. Elizabeth developed a training program that could be adapted to different cultural contexts. Daniel created a practical manual with guidance based on his 3 decades of experience working with families in vulnerable situations. The 5 original children contributed special chapters to the manual, sharing their perspectives on growing up in multiple families and offering advice for other children in similar situations. The manual became an international academic reference and was translated into 12 languages. During the launch of the English version, at an international conference on children's rights, Ethan gave a presentation that summarized the fundamental principles of the model. First, believe that love multiplies when it is shared. Second, always prioritize children's well-being over adult egos. Third, treat all involved families as partners, not competitors. Fourth, allow children to maintain connections with all the people who love them. Fifth, be patient. Family transitions take time to solidify. The presentation was watched by over 1,000 professionals from 50 different countries. Many returned to their nations with concrete plans to implement similar projects. The American model began to be mentioned in international treaties on children's rights as an example of good practice in complex custody situations. The UN created an annual Innovation Award for Child Protection, and Daniel and Elizabeth Center was the first winner. During the award ceremony in New York, Daniel gave a speech that moved the entire audience. "This award is not mine, nor Elizabeth's, nor the 5 children who changed our lives. It belongs to all the families who had the courage to believe that love has no limits. It belongs to all the children who taught us that family is about belonging, not ownership." Elizabeth, upon receiving the trophy, dedicated the award. "To all the children in the world who are waiting for someone to believe they deserve to have many people who love them. And to all the adults who will yet discover that sharing love for a child doesn't diminish that love. It multiplies it." The award brought even greater international visibility to the project. Government delegations began visiting the center to study how to implement public policies based on the American model. The experience influenced legislative changes in several countries, which began legally recognizing multiple custody arrangements and offering institutional support for families in the reunification process. Daniel and Elizabeth, now octogenarians, watched with pride as the seeds planted decades ago sprouted around the world. The 5 original children, all in their 40s, had become respected leaders in their fields and continued expanding the impact of the original model. Their children, the second generation of the multiplied family, began taking on leadership roles at the center, perpetuating the values they had learned. The third generation, Daniel and Elizabeth's great-grandchildren, were growing up in a reality where having multiple sources of family love was completely natural and desirable. During a planning meeting for the center's next 10 years, Ethan made an observation that showed how the experience had evolved. "We are no longer just trying to solve individual family reunification cases. We are changing the culture about what family means." Olivia agreed. "And the most important thing is that this change is happening through the children themselves. They grow up knowing they can have many people who love them, and they will teach this to their own children." The center decided to create an international exchange program, allowing children and families from different countries to see in practice how the multiplied family model worked. The first group of exchange participants arrived 6 months later, 5 families from Canada, who were implementing a similar project in their communities. The Canadian children quickly integrated with the American children, discovering that the challenges and joys of growing up in multiple families were universal. One of the visiting children remarked, "It's the same in Canada. At first the adults worry, but then everyone realizes it's better to have a lot of family than too little family." The exchange program expanded rapidly, welcoming families from all continents. Daniel and Elizabeth, watching children from dozens of nationalities playing together in the old train station courtyard, felt they had witnessed a small revolution in how humanity thinks about family. During an especially meaningful afternoon while watching American, Canadian, Asian, and English children sharing toys and stories, Elizabeth made a comment that summarized the entire journey. "Daniel, do you realize that those 5 photographs in the abandoned train car didn't just change 5 lives? They changed the way hundreds of children around the world understand family." Daniel, at 85 years old, smiled with the wisdom of someone who had lived to see small actions turn into global movements. "And to think it all started because I was looking for firewood to sell. Sometimes the greatest miracles are born from the simplest moments." The conversation was interrupted by Ethan, now 45, and the international director of the Multiplied Families program. "Grandpa Daniel, Mom Elizabeth, do you want to see something special?" He led them to a new room in the center, where there was a permanent exhibition about the evolution of the project. At the heart of the exhibition, in a special display case, were the 5 original photographs that had started the entire journey. Surrounding the original photographs, thousands of other images told the story of all the families that had been touched by the project over 3 decades. "These 5 photographs have multiplied into more than 50,000, said Ethan. "Each one represents a child who learned they could have many families, or a family that learned they could love many children." Daniel looked at the images for a long time, recognizing faces from different times and places. Each photograph represented a unique story, but all connected by the same philosophy of multiplied love. "Do you know what impresses me most about this exhibition?" asked Daniel. Elizabeth and Ethan waited for his observation. "In all these photographs, the children are smiling. Even in the most difficult situations, when they arrived scared and confused, there was always hope in their eyes. That taught me that children are born knowing they deserve love. We adults are the ones who need to remember that." Elizabeth held her husband's hand as she looked at the photographs. "And it taught me that when adults work together for the well-being of children, there are no impossible problems to solve." Ethan hugged them both. "And it taught me that family isn't something you inherit. It's something you build every day, through small acts of love and care." The 3 stood in silence for a few minutes, absorbed by the magnitude of the journey they had shared. The exhibition became a pilgrimage point for families and professionals interested in the model. Visitors left messages in a special book telling how the stories had inspired them. One of the messages, written by a single mother from England, summed up the feeling of many. "I came here thinking I was failing as a mother because my son has many people who love him besides me. I leave here knowing I am a successful mother exactly because of that." Another message, from an adoptive father from Australia, said, "For years I feared my son would want to meet his biological family. Now I understand I can help him in that search without fear of losing him. Love multiplies, it doesn't divide." The messages arrived by the hundreds each month, from people on every continent. Daniel established the habit of reading some of these messages during the center's weekly meetings, reminding the entire team of the global impact their work was generating. During one of these readings, he commented, "Each of these messages proves we didn't just make a community center. We created a worldwide movement of families who believe in the power of shared love." The 5 original children, now leading the movement, began planning a world conference on multiplied families. The conference took place on the center's 50th anniversary, bringing together over 2,000 participants from 80 countries. During the opening ceremony, the 5 original children presented themselves together for the first time in years, telling their individual and collective stories. Olivia, now an internationally recognized lawyer, spoke about how the model had influenced legal changes. Today, over 40 countries legally recognize multiple custody arrangements based on the model we lived in childhood. Thousands of children have their rights protected because we learned that family can have many configurations. Nathan, an engineer specializing in social projects, presented data on expansion. There are more than 200 centers similar to ours, operating on 5 continents, each one adapted to its cultural reality, but all based on the same principles of multiplied love. Mason, through his documentaries, had recorded over 1,000 stories of successful family reunification. Every story I've documented proves we are not exceptional cases. We are examples of what can happen when adults decide to put children's well-being above their own insecurities. Emily, with her art exhibitions, had sensitized millions of people about different family models. My art tries to show that family is not a fixed photograph. It's a moving film, always changing, always growing, always adapting to the needs of those we love. Ethan, as coordinator of the international movement, presented the future plans. In the next 10 years, we want no child in the world to have to choose between their different families. We want every child to know they can have as many people loving them as their heart can hold. The audience rose in a prolonged ovation. Many participants cried, moved by the simplicity and depth of the messages. Daniel and Elizabeth, seated in the front row, watched proudly the 5 people they had helped raise and who now led a worldwide movement. During the conference closing, Daniel was invited to give the final speech. At 90 years old, he climbed the stage supported by Elizabeth and the 5 children. His voice was frailer, but his words held all their strength. 60 years ago, 5 photographs frightened me because I thought I would lose my children. Today, looking at this audience of 2,000 people from 80 countries, I know those photographs didn't make me lose anything. They showed me a world where no child needs to choose between the people who love them. He paused, looking at the 5 children beside him. Olivia, Nathan, Mason, Emily and Ethan, you taught me that family isn't about ownership, it's about belonging. You were never my children in the sense of possession. You were always my children in the sense of love. And that love multiplied so much that now we have a family of thousands of people around the world. Tears streamed down the faces of many conference participants. Daniel concluded, "If I could leave just one message for the world, it would be this. Love is not a limited resource. The more you share, the more you have. The more people love your children, the safer and happier they become. Don't be afraid of big families. Be afraid of small families." The ovation lasted 15 minutes. Participants from all countries stood up, applauded, cried, and hugged each other. Elizabeth stepped up to the microphone for the final words. Daniel and I are just 2 people who were lucky enough to cross paths with 5 special photographs. But each one of you can be the Daniel or the Elizabeth in some child's life. Each one can choose to multiply love instead of dividing it. The conference ended with a collective commitment. All participants pledged to implement at least one concrete action in their communities to support families in vulnerable situations. In the following months, hundreds of new projects were created around the world, all inspired by the American model. Daniel and Elizabeth, now in their 90s, continued living near the original center, joyfully watching the global expansion of the movement they had helped create. They received weekly visits from the 5 children, now mature adults with their own established families. During one of these visits, Ethan brought special news. "Grandpa Daniel, Mom Elizabeth, you have been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize." The nomination recognized the contribution of the American model to promoting peace through strengthening family structures around the world. Daniel laughed upon hearing the news. "A Nobel Peace Prize for teaching children to have many families. The world has truly changed." Elizabeth smiled. "Actually, it makes perfect sense. Children who grow up knowing they can have many people who love them become more peaceful and empathetic adults." Even though they didn't win the prize that year, the nomination brought even more international visibility to the movement. Documentaries were produced in various languages, books were written, and universities created entire courses based on the American model of multiplied family. The 5 original children became international speakers, sharing their experiences at academic conferences, government meetings, and community events. Each developed specific aspects of the model. Olivia focused on the legal aspects, Nathan on the infrastructure of similar projects, Mason on communication and documentation, Emily on artistic awareness, and Ethan on therapeutic coordination. Together, they formed a complete team that could implement similar projects in any cultural context. During a 60th anniversary review meeting of the center, Ethan presented impressive statistics. The original model has been adapted and implemented in 120 countries. More than 200,000 children have been directly benefited. It is estimated that over 1 million people have been indirectly impacted. Olivia added legal data. 68 countries have changed their legislation to recognize multiple custody arrangements. 12 international treaties include references to the American model. Nathan reported physical expansion. There are over 500 similar centers operating worldwide. Each serves an average of 200 families annually. Mason presented communication data. Our documentaries have been seen by more than 50 million people. The stories have been translated into 40 languages. Emily showed artistic impact. The exhibitions on multiplied families have visited 300 cities on 6 continents. Each exhibition attracts an average of 20,000 visitors. The numbers were impressive, but Daniel and Elizabeth knew that behind each statistic were real human stories of children who had learned to love and be loved by multiple families. During a quiet afternoon, Daniel and Elizabeth walked to the old train car where it had all begun. Now transformed into a memorial, the space preserved the original features, but included exhibits about the evolution of the project. Elizabeth, if you could go back in time and speak to that Daniel who found the photographs for the first time, what would you say? He asked. Elizabeth thought carefully. I would say, Daniel, don't be afraid of the photographs. They didn't come to take your children from you. They came to show that your children have even more people who love them than you imagined. And if you could speak to the Elizabeth who met you for the first time, asked Daniel, I would say, Elizabeth, get ready for the most incredible adventure of your life. You are going to help 5 children become world leaders of a movement of love. And you'll discover that family can be even bigger and more wonderful than you ever dreamed. They sat on the refurbished benches of the rail car, looking at photographs of hundreds of families that had been helped over the years. Daniel, do you have any regrets about this whole journey? Asked Elizabeth. He answered without hesitation. My only regret is not finding those photographs sooner. Imagine how many other children could have been helped if we had started a few years earlier. And you, Elizabeth? He asked. I regret not believing immediately that it was possible. I spent the first years thinking our case was exceptional, that it worked by luck. Today I know it works, because love truly multiplies when it is shared, she replied. They sat in silence, watching the movement of the center through the railcar windows. Children played, families talked, professionals handled new cases. Life continued to flourish in the place where it had all begun. Ethan appeared in the railcar doorway. Grandpa Daniel, Mom Elizabeth, there's a new family arriving, a situation very similar to ours from decades ago. 5 children living with a person who found them in an abandoned state, and now they've discovered they have biological families looking for them. Daniel smiled. And are they scared? Very scared. The children don't want to be separated from each other, and the man caring for them is afraid of losing them, replied Ethan. Elizabeth stood up. Then let's go. We have a story to tell. The 3 walked together toward the main office, where a new family was about to discover that love multiplies when it is shared. Daniel, at 95, still had the energy to counsel families in complex situations. Elizabeth, at 92, continued to offer therapeutic support when needed. The 5 original children, now in their 50s, had become the main mentors for new cases similar to what they had lived through. The center had established a special protocol for situations involving multiple children being reunified simultaneously with different biological families. The protocol was based on experience accumulated over 6 decades and included specific steps: initial assessment of the children's emotional needs, mapping of all families involved, mediation between all adults, establishment of co-living agreements, gradual transition, and long-term supervision. During the session with the new family, Daniel told his own story in a simple, direct way. 60 years ago, I was in your exact situation. 5 children I loved as my own, biological families wanting to take them back, and me afraid of losing everything. The man, who was named Nathan and was 40 years old, listened carefully. And how did you resolve it? I learned that I wasn't going to lose 5 children. I was going to gain dozens of relatives, and my children weren't going to lose a father. They were going to gain multiple fathers and mothers, replied Daniel. Elizabeth explained the process. The transition takes time and requires cooperation from all the adults, but when it works, the children become more secure and happier than before. The 5 children involved in the new case were between 6 and 13 years old, very similar to the ages Olivia, Nathan, Mason, Emily, and Ethan were when they were reunified. Ethan, as the center's coordinator, proposed a detailed plan. We will locate all the biological families, organize supervised meetings, and create a co-living agreement that allows the children to maintain their bonds with each other. The process took 6 months, but it was successful. The 5 new children were gradually reunified with their families of origin, but maintained regular contact with each other through activities organized by the center. Nathan, the man who had raised them, became a sort of honorary father to all of them, participating in family events and offering support when needed. 2 years later, during a follow-up meeting, one of the new children commented, "It's just like the stories you used to tell. At first I was afraid of having too much family. Now I'm afraid of having too little family." The observation made everyone laugh, but it also confirmed that the model continued to work effectively even decades after its original creation. Daniel and Elizabeth, now centenarians, continued to follow new cases with interest and joy. During a special interview to celebrate Daniel's 100th birthday, he was asked what he considered his greatest legacy. "My greatest legacy is 5 people who learned they can love and be loved by many families simultaneously. And those 5 people taught that to their children, who are teaching it to their children. In a few generations, no child in the world will grow up thinking they have to choose between the people who love them," he replied. The interview was watched by millions of people around the world and inspired a new wave of similar projects. Elizabeth, at 97, remained lucid and active. During the same interview, she offered a reflection that summarized the entire philosophy of the movement. "We discovered that children are no one's property. They are everyone's responsibility. The more adults take responsibility for a child, the safer that child becomes." The 5 original children, now in their 50s and 60s, had become grandparents and great-grandparents, perpetuating the tradition of multiplied family for new generations. Their children and grandchildren were growing up in a world where having multiple families was completely normal and desirable. During a 4-generation reunion of the extended family, one of Daniel's great-grandchildren asked a question that showed how the concepts had evolved. "Great-grandpa Daniel, why did people in the past think it was strange to have a lot of family?" Daniel, at 102, smiled at the innocence of the question. "Because they didn't know that love multiplies when it's shared, my grandson. They thought love was like money. The more you gave to one person, the less was left for others." The great-grandchild considered the answer. "But that's silly. The more I love you all, the more love I have to give to everyone." "Exactly," agreed Daniel. "And you learned that because you grew up in a family that teaches that truth from a young age." The conversation was recorded by Mason as part of the extended family's historical archive. The community center had become a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized as the birthplace of a movement that changed the global understanding of family structures. Delegations from all parts of the world visited the site regularly to study the model and adapt it to their own cultures. The center's library maintained a collection of over 10,000 academic studies on multiplied family produced at universities on every continent. The model had influenced public policies, legislative changes, therapeutic protocols, and most importantly, the way millions of families around the world understood the concepts of love, care, and belonging. During a special ceremony to mark the 70th anniversary of the discovery of the photographs, representatives from 80 countries gathered at the center to celebrate the global impact of the movement. The 5 original photographs were displayed in a solemn ceremony, surrounded by thousands of others documenting the families helped over the decades. Daniel, Elizabeth, and the 5 original children were honored with honorary degrees from various international universities. But for them, the greatest honor remained seeing happy children playing in the center's courtyard, surrounded by multiple parental figures who loved them unconditionally. During the closing speech of the ceremony, Olivia, now 66 years old and internationally recognized as a family law expert, made an observation that summarized the impact of the entire journey. 70 years ago, 5 photographs frightened a good man who thought he would lose his children. Today, those same photographs inspire millions of people around the world to believe that children can have as many families as their hearts can love. Daddy Daniel did not lose 5 children. He helped the world gain a new way of understanding family. The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted nearly an hour. People of dozens of nationalities cried, applauded, and hugged, united by the shared experience of believing in the multiplying power of love. Daniel and Elizabeth, seated side by side in the front row, watched the scene with the serenity of those who had witnessed a small miracle turn into a worldwide movement. Elizabeth whispered to Daniel, "Do you realize those 5 photographs changed not only our lives, but how humanity thinks about family?" Daniel, at 105 years old, smiled with the wisdom of a lifetime dedicated to multiplied love. And to think it all started because I was looking for firewood in the forest. Sometimes the greatest miracles are born from the simplest moments. The 5 children approached their heart parents, forming a family circle that had stayed united for 7 decades. Ethan, now 61 years old and global director of the movement, made the final comment. Dad Daniel, Mom Elizabeth, you taught us that family isn't about blood or legal documents. It's about daily choices of love and care. And that lesson has spread all over the world. Emily, at 59 years old, added, and you taught us that there's no limit to how many people can love a child. The more love, the better. The twins, now 58 years old, spoke alternately as they had since childhood. Nathan, you proved that adults can work together. Mason, instead of competing for the children's love. Olivia, the eldest at 66, concluded, and you showed us that miracles happen when ordinary people decide to do extraordinary things driven by love. The family circle closed in a collective hug that symbolized 7 decades of multiplied and shared love. The photographs that once frightened Daniel in the abandoned train car had become the worldwide symbol of hope for families in vulnerable situations. The center would continue operating for many future generations, perpetuating the fundamental lesson born from that chance encounter in the forest. Love multiplies when it is shared. End of story. Dear listeners, this extraordinary story shows us how small moments can change entire lives. Daniel never imagined that looking for firewood in the forest would lead him to discover 5 photographs that would transform not only his life, but the lives of thousands of families around the world. Now we want to hear from you. What did you think of this emotional journey of multiplied love? Do you believe families can have multiple configurations and still be happy? Leave your comments sharing your own family experiences and tell us where you're watching from. If this story touched you in a special way, don't forget to leave your like and especially subscribe to the channel. You are essential for us to continue bringing stories that move and inspire. Thank you so much for your company, and see you next time.